am Jordan Zachary, the writer and publisher of Progress Report. I am very excited to be joined by Wisconsin State Assembly member and a candidate for governor, Jessica Hong. She is you're in your third term now, I think, and
Um,
you are running to be the head of the state, the great state of Wisconsin. And very excited. I was excited when I saw the news, and I knew I needed to get you on right away. And luckily we were able to do that. So thank you for taking your Sunday night.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, I mean, obviously people are starting to fill up. People know who you are a little bit, but just people who are new, maybe haven't been following the ins and outs of Wisconsin politics, give us a little bit the one page, the quick bio, the brief. What is your who is Francesca Hong?
I'm a very, very proud service industry worker and a single mom. I've been, well, my parents immigrated here from South Korea, so I'm a daughter of immigrants. And I joined the state legislature in 2020. And that was another moment of deep chaos and crisis. And so the community sent me to the legislature, and I think the community is ready to send me to the governor's office.
So what was it? I mean, lots of things happened in 2020, right? It was crazy times. But looking back on it, almost feels quaint. What were the things that got you going, deciding to run in the first place? Because you were, like you said, you're in the food industry. You opened a restaurant, like that was your main thing. So how did you end up jumping into politics?
Well, when COVID hit, we ended up closing the restaurant, and I was trying to help my staff with unemployment benefits, making sure that folks were able to just navigate this time of deep uncertainty. And I realized then how much the system was rigged against working class people, right? My focus was on making sure that workers were healthy, that the people who came into the restaurant felt safe, and that it was a place for nourishment. But COVID happened, and all of the essentially fucked up things in society came roaring out. And
Yeah.
so we can only rely on mutual aid so much, right? And so we were creating meals and bringing them to folks' doors. We started to repay our workers with money that we were making, selling meals to be delivered. And as we were trying to do this, the Republican majority in the state legislature were basically endangering lives. They undermined public health. They wouldn't let our governor, do the executive orders that he needed to. So our community rallied to have a different kind of leadership. The foul mouth mom, service industry worker, and restaurant owner who, it's in our blood really as service industry workers to bring people together, to connect folks. And, we hustle, we work really hard, and we get things done. And so folks were ready for that leadership and sent me to the legislature to fight for them, but also fight alongside them.
It's wild because you think back to Wisconsin 5 years ago because of the gerrymander, not just because of the way the politics were there, but it was, it's now changed a bit, obviously with the state Supreme Court. You've had Tony Evers for two terms now, but the the right wing furor, the way that they were able to abuse things and block progress or block anything for help for anybody was just such a unnaturally far right state for so long. It must have been driven you nuts to be like a business owner there and then to be in the legislature during the early years.
Yeah, I mean, the legislature led by Robin Foss, they were interested in hoarding power and serving billionaires and taking away rights from working class people, making it harder for our public schools and public institutions to serve the folks who are coming through and our students. And so a lot of what I call banging my head on the marble. But if you can't change the policy because of the power, then you change the culture and you organize. And so that was my focus, was to ensure that folks knew that there were people who were still fighting for them, still trying to make sure that our workers could access unions, make sure that we were passing legislation of what could be if we didn't have Republican authoritarianism in the state. So that was the focus. I was able to pass legislation, to many people's surprise. Worked with Republicans to pass a bill that would ensure K-12 public schools taught Asian American history. But beyond that, every budget that the Evers was forced to sign, most of the bills were aimed at harming communities, not making them healthier or allowing people to have economic security.
Yeah, it's is it get you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I think my favorite factor of Robert Bose is that like he just was like a popcorn magnate, right? That was his thing. He's just like a popcorn guy. Then he took over like the state. He's like single handedly took over the state government. It was wild to me.
Yeah, he had a popcorn company and he's also a bit of a slumlord. And so if you
Ah,
look at our statutes, they are designed to benefit landlords and not renters. There's not a lot of tenant rights here, definitely no rent control. And so that was all at the whim of Robin Voss and him serving his billionaire donors like Diane Hendricks and probably John Menard. I mean, that guy made $18 billion over the last 5 years. So, folks, think about going to your local hardware store, not Menards.
yeah, it's this the U lines, right? They're big in Wisconsin, right? And whenever I see I just everywhere now, I notice it. The U line, they make everything, so I try to avoid it. It's impossible.
Yeah, pretty much like most to go boxes, any boxes that you're using for moving, there's going to be a U and then a line underneath. And that is the U line with the H in it, who are essentially are monopolizing the paper company, if you will, to
Yeah.
making boxes and other things for transport.
Things have changed in Wisconsin to some degree, like because the state supreme court flipped, obviously, and districts have flipped to some degree. So that's been really nice to see. And so, what have you noticed being in the legislature? How things have changed? Obviously, Republicans still have the majority, but has it become easier to get things done, or has it become like, like more cordial at least? Like, has it changed?
They are responding with, I think, even more fury. They are not interested in legislation that would improve working class people's lives, instead, focusing on culture wars and going after vulnerable communities. And so it's cookie cutter legislation that comes from the right, attacking immigrants, attacking queer youth, making it so that we are villainizing working class people who rely on things like uninsured benefits when they're moving from job to job. And so it's become more of a culture of demonizing to distract us from the fact that they are refusing to do their work, be responsible with our tax dollars, making sure we're getting our money's worth to fund things like public schools, childcare, making healthcare cheaper. They're not interested in any of that.
You're running in a primary that's got a lot of people in it already, and so like there's going to be there's different types of Democrats running. Obviously, it's not all the same type, and so there's been a lot of talk about like what Democrats should stand for, what they should do. You mentioned how they are going on the right, they are pursuing these culture wars, not necessarily fighting for working class people. There's people on the Democratic side that say, oh, we should moderate on those sorts of issues, and kind of throw some people under the bus. But I imagine that's not your approach to it, right? Because Wisconsin's a perfect, like an absolute total swing state. And so I feel like trying to strategize how to win Wisconsin is like the ultimate goal of every Democratic person in the world, right? Trying to figure out how do we want a state like Wisconsin. And so I'm wondering what your perspective is because I don't think it's let's throw the like you said the queer youth under the bus.
We have to recognize the moment that we are in, right? It's raining fascism. If Jimmy Kimmel getting kicked off the air for what he said and not doing something that the regime liked, that should tell people that we are in an absolute crisis mode where the freedoms and rights of being an American are being threatened every day. And so that requires a response that is bold, unapologetic, and we have to push transformative legislation like universal health care, like universal child care. And these are policies that we can actually move on, but it's going to take both political will and political courage and build up political capital to burn it, right? And make sure that we are focusing on working class people first, because it turns out those policies help all Wisconsinites.
Yeah, I mean, when you walk, I mean, I know you're in a very liberal district. You're in Madison, like, but is when you go around Wisconsin, like, what are the things that people say to you that they really care about? Because I mean, I live in New York City, so I can only say, I mean, I talk to people all over the country, right? But I can't tell you what the people necessarily in like Wisconsin, in rural Wisconsin are talking about or thinking about, or middle class Wisconsin. Like, what are the things that they are talking about? Because I don't know. Obviously, some people get mad about trans kids. Some people get mad about, who gets to marry who. But I imagine that like it's not the conversation you usually have with voters.
Turns out it's a universal issue to care about our elders and our seniors. Wisconsin is an aging state. When we've got hospitals closing and the big ugly bill and slashing Medicaid is going to impact our most rural communities who also happen to have Republican representation, right? And so folks are talking about where to send their aging parents to make sure that they can age with dignity. Because our care workers right now, some of them are making less than what you can make at Quick Trip hourly. These are jobs that cannot be automated. These are jobs that take immense amounts of mental and emotional labor. And so, regardless of zip code, people are concerned about health. Hospitals closing. They're really scared about utility bills going up because of the data centers that are coming in and being built in our state. So I focus a lot about on care infrastructure, the care economy. What does that mean? Investing in childcare, in long-term care, making sure our care workers, like in-home health aides, mental health care workers, our nursing assistants, our PAs, they are all part of this care infrastructure that we need to be able to live their lives with dignity and healthier. So that I'm hearing a lot about long-term care and childcare. We should tell folks that these are multi-generational issues that impact folks regardless of zip code.
Yeah, I mean, New Mexico just became the first state to guarantee childcare. I mean, obviously they have a Democratic trifecta, but that's the sort of thing. So, like I said, as we were coming on air, that I have a 3-year-old, and he just turned 3. He just started 3K, which is like preschool, basically, right? And so, but it's free in the city. I mean, we have to pay for aftercare, but it is like transformative. The amount of money that it costs. I mean, obviously, like New York City is the most expensive, one of the most expensive places in the country, but like the how the difference it makes, and like it's kept like some of my friends in the city, right? It's keeping us in the city, and like that is like hard to really like underscore. It's hard to oversell like how big that is.
We have been, I would say, it's a childcare catastrophe right now in Wisconsin. There are, in the next couple of years, 60 childcare centers are at risk of closing. I learned this when I was in Hortonville, Wisconsin, just northeast of Madison. And we had childcare providers come up with this data. I didn't even know it was that many at 60, right, in the next 2 years. For many of us, full-time childcare is going to cost as much as sending your kid to college. And so it should be a public good. You should be able to send your kid to a place where you know they're going to be healthy and be well cared for, and that you go and work in a job that you want to, or multiple jobs in many people's like cases, right? But we haven't thought about this type of infrastructure, and that's because we haven't had policies that focus on working class families. So childcare is something I hear from actually older folks a lot, right?
Okay.
We cannot just rely. My parents helped me with my son, with my
Yeah.
kiddo. Right? We can't just rely on the grandparents. These are jobs that are professions, and if we don't start respecting these jobs and ensuring that our care workers, childcare workers, are being paid adequately, it's gonna, it impacts the local economy and ultimately the state economy. And so these are practical, fiscally responsible policies, yet folks think better and transformative is not possible because we always get that same question of how much it's going to cost. Well,
Right.
it's cost us too much not to do these things.
I mean, like I said, I live in New York right now. We have 3K pre-K. It's been a little underfunded, but it's still pretty big. We now obviously, like, knock on wood, we'll have a new mayor that is in favor of these sorts of things. And so obviously New York and Wisconsin are very different, right? To some degree, like in terms of who lives here and some of the cultural stuff. But there's not very liberal parts of Wisconsin, but I think we can say there's New York City and Wisconsin a little bit different electorate. But like, what do you take from the success of someone like Zoran Mamdani, or a lot of like the kind of the populist candidates that are kind of cropping up around the country, like in terms of both like how you talk, what's the right way to talk about these things, and also like how do you defy like those kind of doubts that you get from a lot of Democrats, like, oh, we can't run to the left, we can't do big things, we can't promise big things because we have such a far right government right now.
Part of authoritarianism is to take away our ability to imagine, to dream, to think bigger, right? And what the Mamdani campaign has done so beautifully is build this coalition. If you look at the people he's showing up for, right, they don't often see a politician who's campaigning coming into their faith spaces, the potlucks and church basements, going to your bodega, right? Like I think that in itself, showing up for folks and centering on the one issue that everyone can agree on, which is New York is too expensive. Right now in Wisconsin, too, we pride ourselves in hard work, but working hard doesn't get you by any. And I think that when I speak very clearly to, hey, what's going on with hospitals in your area, especially in rural areas, you might have to travel an hour, 2 hours to get care. It doesn't have to be that way. Corporations, hospitals also happen to be mega corporations. And when people think about, you can get folks to think about how you are not getting your money's worth, right? It might not be the exact messaging that they're using in New York, but when Zoran is speaking clearly to what you as an individual deserve for working hard. And we're seeing everyone, the billionaires' wealth grow, the millionaires' wealth grow, while working class people who pride themselves in their work are still struggling. Folks tend to want to share stories about that. And I think that is what the Democrats have struggled to do. It's not just the message, it's also the messenger. And so how do we fend off the elitism that has like destroyed so much of the Democratic Party? And it's having working class candidates speak directly to working class people. That is what Zoran does so well. And he centers them and their issues. So like the one-on-one interviews that he does with people in the street, it's incredibly powerful because it's social proof. You're seeing your neighbor, someone that you can relate to, tell you that they're dealing with these issues as well. When we have a common struggle or collective struggle, that means there can be a collective solution. The system is just rigged to not let us do that. But when we have leadership that is bold and wants to pass transformative policies that are, again, practical to make sure working class people have better wages, that we have access to childcare, access to good public schools, and that things are all cheaper so that our taxes aren't going to tax cuts for the billionaires, that tends to make a lot of sense for folks.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where people, like I said, like we're New York is different. We got a lot of Democrats or people who end up voting for Democrats, but there's a lot of people in Wisconsin who are not Democrats, but who may be populist, right? And so, like, what is it that you mentioned, like the elitism? What is it that, like, in your experience, like, even just putting aside the fact that you are a Democrat, like, that people hate about Democrats? Yeah, what do you when you? I mean, I spend a lot of my time talking to union members. My job is like a lot of that, like, a lot of that. So I spent a lot of time, talking to people who just don't like Democrats either. But for you, like as someone who like works like in it every single day, like what are the things that really put them off? Because again, there's this belief that maybe it's social issues, or maybe it's like beliefs that some people think it's because of the socialism, the dirty word socialism. But what to you is it like? What's the thing that like really turns them off?
Dems have had an issue of making people or forcing them to believe what's going on before making them feel like they belong. And so if you don't feel like a working class person is speaking to you and actually can relate to what's going on right now, I know that there are Democrats who came from very working class backgrounds, have dealt with eviction and poverty, and those stories are incredibly impactful. But in this moment of a regime, folks, it you it's harder to sell when you're not someone who's going through it to say that, oh, this sucks, but I'm going to make it better, right? I think it's the we. I think it's the be a part of something bigger, be a part of a coalition. We can have better when we have leaders who are going to be, I get knocked all the time for swearing, but I think what folks are missing is that I'm swearing because I'm angry. I'm
Yeah,
swearing because I'm frustrated. And we are validating what people are feeling instead of telling them that things are going to be different, without acknowledging just the hurt, the struggle, the anger, and expecting them to hope and then believe us when we say that we're going to change things when we haven't delivered. And we haven't delivered because they weren't universal policies that centered working class people first. Also, I feel like a lot of Dems just like don't care that much about poor people sometimes. Not all
yeah,
of them. It's like,
right.
are we thinking about those folks first?
Yeah, I mean, has it been like the Wisconsin Democratic Party has changed so much, the last bunch of years. Obviously, Ben Wickler did an amazing job in terms of organizing and getting things going. And so, do you feel like that has shifted to some degree? Are people seeing it differently? Obviously, maybe not nationally, but in Wisconsin, you guys just won the Supreme Court race pretty handily over, I guess, thanks to Elon Musk. Maybe, like, do you feel like that's changing there?
Oh, Ben did an amazing job. building organizing infrastructure, a strong fundraising program, and organizing all year round, not just in the big general or midterm years, right? And so people are recognizing, I think, that organizing works. And so that means we need more politicians, especially when we have a Republican majority right now in the legislature, that we have to be going to talk to people about who is responsible for things like, the majority of Wisconsinites want to legalize weed. The majority of Wisconsinites want cheaper healthcare. The majority of Wisconsinites support strong public schools. We haven't been effective in naming the villain, but also saying, look, it's the state legislature that controls these things, and it's the state legislature that is run by Republicans. Evers has been governing by goaltending. And so the Democrats, I think over the last couple of years, we have done a better job of that messaging. But even just today, I was at an organizing meeting with Indivisible, our chapter here in East
Mhm.
Madison. And I had a couple of guys, both were former military, and they're like, where is the one pager that I can just pull out? And when I'm talking to folks at the gun range or at some of the bars that I go to with bikers, that I can just say, this is what is happening. And that tells me that we still have so much more work to do when it comes to communicating, connecting with working class people who don't, Democrats have always been the villain, but when you speak directly to the economic issue as opposed to going to a place and saying, I never lead with I'm State Representative Francesca Hall. I try to show up in spaces where folks are just like, I'm that normal person. I'm a
Yeah.
working person. And when you have a messenger a, the messenger matters just as much as the message. And I'm really grateful to Ben and the party for building up good infrastructure. I'm hoping to build a coalition with the left, some of the moderates, even some of the Republicans liked my video, right?
Mm.
And it's because I'm in a kitchen where I
Yeah.
still continue to work the most I can. And so this is about different representation.
I wanted to ask you about that. Like, you are, I mean, being a state representative is, state legislator is not a like it's not a slow job. It's not a job that requires it's only a few hours, but you take up shifts still at bars at the bars and restaurants. So tell me a little bit about that because I like, was tired reading. I mean, I work hard myself, but I was kind of tired reading about that, just knowing that like that is like you shot in the kitchen where you work sometimes. So tell me about that because that is to me, like when do you sleep? You have a young kid too, so like seriously, when do you sleep?
Uh, I get a good amount of sleep. I think I just find different pockets to work here and there, and I have to be very good at delegation and where but that efficiency comes from working in a kitchen,
Yeah.
right? You walk in and you have to get all of your prep ready for that night's service. You're thinking right away about how many things can I be working at once? Where does like a little bit more precision have to go in, or a little bit more care on things? What do I need to delegate to another line cook, or maybe even do I need to go have run dishes? Because we don't have a dishwasher who is able to come in today. All of these different factors go into making sure that we can still get the job done at the end of the day. So working in restaurants, bartending, it trained me both in like in a mechanical and organizing sense of what all has to get done in order to have service. But you can have all of your me's ready and the variable is still the customer. So there
Mm.
has to be this like personal, and that's where bartending is so powerful, I think,
Yeah.
is you learn how to listen to a lot of different folks. You may not be a super active listener while you're thinking about the drink you're going to make for the next person, what you have to pull from another part of the bar while you're making sure that the first person's order is all taken there for you. And so working in the service industry has only prepared me to be a better legislator. And it's because I know with my lack of experience, when I first went into the legislature, I had an opened outlook and wasn't quite sure how I could even use it yet.
Yeah.
But um, we're going to out hustle folks, and that's how I know organizing is going to work. And this campaign is an organizer first campaign, and we're going to build out progressive organizing infrastructure, building on some of the work that the Dems have already done. And I had help. Was in lacrosse just yesterday, and we had a meet and greet in the lacrosse Dem office, and everyone who showed up were either socialists or somehow associated with DSA, and they met some of the Dem volunteers there. And so I'm I think that's going to happen a lot more in this campaign, where we bring people together who want to fight back against the regime, but recognize that it's going to take fighting alongside one another as organizers to get this done.
It's interesting. You mentioned fighting against the regime, right? Like, and I can speak to. There's a lot, so much dissatisfaction when people talk about Dems need to do more. Dems need to do more. Like, and on in the Senate, obviously in the House, that's very, very, very true. But then you see things like what happens in states, and there's some states are like resisting sending voter data. Some states are trying to push back on, like military occupations by the federal government. Like, what does that mean to you? Like fighting back against, a regime in D.C. when you are in Madison.
It means hyper local organizing rooted in care. So I tell folks, like, when you are looking out for your neighbor, and people are doing meal trains when they learn that someone isn't, of good health in their neighborhood. People want to do something tangible, and it's like, look, right now we're going to see food insecurity skyrocket. We already have, when I go to pantries or other types of feed kitchens, they have more and more clients. Folks have to start organizing and recognizing that the mutual aid matters right now. Getting involved in your party office, like a Democratic Party office, and you want to do more of the electoral side, fine. There are so many different ways to make a difference, and every little bit counts. But when you focus on that care work, community care work, and that mutual aid, it feels like you can do more, and it has to start at a very local community level. And I say this all the time. It's concentric circle organizing. And so with the federal government raining down all of these horrors, and you're seeing just the country is in shambles. Look at what's going on in your neighborhood. Try to figure out where you can go volunteer. Can you formulate a meal train? Also, we might have to get more people into group chats to have kind of a crisis response. What sort of training can you go to and is available in your community? And if it's not, the internet can be a place of good sometimes. And there are a lot of people sharing resources on how to organize. We have one right here, actually. We made a zine, how to
Oh, cool.
organize your friends and your foes. And
Love a
so
zine.
there's a lot that can happen at the local level. And that's also has to be considered as fighting, because it
Yeah.
is.
And so when those things like that happen, I mean, we looked at LA, right? There was basically they invaded, right? And they eventually were forced to pull back a little bit due to like court orders. I don't even know where that stands. Right? I think maybe they said legally they can just discriminate now. But now they're going to go to Memphis. Maybe they're not doing it in Chicago because of, Jimmy Pitzer kind of stood up. And so let's say you're governor and they're like, hey, we want to roll through the National Guard and military here. Like, how do you stand up to that? Because I imagine there's things you can do, but there's also things. It's more sometimes it's more rhetorical than it is like actual just legal action you could take.
I look at organizers on the ground. Like in Milwaukee, there's an amazing group called Black Leaders Organizing Community. And yes, they're going to hit the streets, but they're also strategically working to make sure that the leaders in their community are going to say no to the National Guard coming through. We have to have leaders who aren't just going to meet violence with more violence and perpetuate the cycles of violence. It is going to take a coalition of people rejecting the National Guard or whatever, like other fuckery that Trump might be bringing in. And I think it's right now an over reliance on uh, local, state, and county government officials, and they are not bringing in the input from local organizations who are actually in communities right now. So we it is going to take forces and voices like Pritzker, and I hope folks take note of that. But there isn't enough of bringing in the people who are actually on the ground, the communities that are subject to a lot of police violence already, and hearing out how those folks need to be supported and heard too. And so it has to always be kind of a multifaceted response, but I remind folks that just trying to show up and out National Guard, a different, the state, our state
Mhm.
National Guard we're not, you know, sometimes fighting with fire just brings on more fires.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're there's like I said, there's a lot of Democrats running in this election, and like you talking about like sort of that grassroots is sometimes a little bit different than what a lot of Democrats want to talk about. And so I'm curious, like how you see your positioning in this race, right? Like, I mean, it's still other people might jump in, but there's like four or five people jumping in. Like, what do you see as your not maybe ideological, but I guess political ideological lane, and like how you create a coalition that might be different and might be ultimately bigger than other people who are running.
We're already doing it. I mean, the first 36 hours raised over $115,000 with the average donation of $47 or less. We have over 400 volunteers that signed up in the first 48 hours. This is unprecedented, I think, for a candidate like me who has not run statewide and has already been in the legislature, but I've always been an organizer. And if you look at where those donations and the people who have signed up to volunteer are, it's Superior, Wisconsin, some of the most northern points in the state, all the way down to right before we get to Illinois near Rockford, right? So, how I'm positioning myself is with other grassroots organizers, folks who have felt very apathetic, people who probably didn't even know that there was going to be an August 11th primary for that's going to determine who our nominee is going to be for the election of the highest office here in Wisconsin. And so that is what we're going to continue carrying and building on is that coalition that is multi-generational, multiracial, and multi-geographic. And the folks who maybe even sat out in 2024, a lot of the young people who I've been talking with who want nothing to do with politics right now, but they're ready to jump into a candidate that excites them, that is hustling, that is doing actual grassroots organizing. And I positioning maybe, but we're staying focused on our strategy and our race, and that's powered by working class people.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing you can say that I don't speak about or for any other candidates. I think there's probably a lot of good ones, but you are not ambiguous about where you stand on things, right? Like that is one thing you've like last year. I mean, you were one of the I guess Politico called like the leader of the Wisconsin anti-Biden protest vote, like on Israel, and I mean that I think has showed good vision, right? Like based on where things are now. And so you mentioned people skipping out on elections, and I mean, that's the other thing. It's like there's a lot of talk about do you try to equivocate? Not you personally, but as a candidate, try to equivocate and move to a center, or try to, uh, you know, muddy up issues and just make it about we're going to fight Trump, or is it someone who's going to like stand on a lot of like very specific principles? And it seems to me like you're the latter as well, and that might get some people engaged that who wouldn't be otherwise.
I'm proud to be who I am, and that's a service industry worker, a single mom, someone who relentlessly organizes, but also struggling right now. I can balance multiple jobs and being a renter right now when rent prices are going up. So speaking to my lived experiences, making sure that folks know that these policies are possible, that I've seen what people are pushing back on with my colleagues sometimes. And it's always that same question of how do we pay for it? And it's like, look, more folks now than ever recognize that our tax dollars are going to fund billionaires and multimillionaires. More folks are recognizing now that the system is rigged. It's going to take more of us to unrig it, to fix it. But when we have a clear objective, and right now folks are feeling that, and are, they're energized with they want to get something done and they want to do something and believe in somebody who wants that change as much as they do. And it's not going to be lip service. It's going to be organizing. And so the talking about universal childcare, universal guaranteed paid leave, making sure people know that you shouldn't have to go to work sick. I know what that's like because I didn't have health insurance for a lot of my time working in kitchens. And I went to work sick because I didn't want to skip out on, like, I couldn't afford any fewer hours to make sure that I was paid for, to make sure that I was getting paid.
Right.
So left, right, centrist of issues. Folks are concerned about their utility bills. They want someone going into the governor's office who cares just as much about that because they're in that struggle right now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about how, it's so silly sometimes when you think about federalism in the way that, like, in Minnesota and in Michigan and in Illinois and the states that are nearby, like, you can take a day off because 'cause you're sick, right? You can, like, you earn paid leave. You can, like, have some, hope of having, like, a childcare, at least some sort of, like, government program. Minnesota's trying to do universal, like, pre-K. And so it's it's gotta be so frustrating in the sense that people ask you, "How are you gonna pay for it? How are you gonna pay for it?" But it's happening all over, right? It's happening in all your neighbor states. And so it's gotta be frustrating to be like, "Well, how do they do it?" It's the same way, you just don't fund a Foxconn instead.
And now we're about to maybe do a data center, but we I point to the states who are doing it wrong too, and
Mhm.
that's Florida.
Yeah,
Florida has actually had a surplus for many years, and they're about to run into multi-billion-dollar deficit because they have a universal voucher program now, where taxpayer money is being used to pay for unaccountable voucher schools so that wealthier folks can send their kid to private schools. I mean,
yeah,
Tederico talks about this in Texas all the time. Wisconsin is actually where that voucher program
right.
started. We are often like the breeding ground for conservative policy. If it happens in Wisconsin, we're just going to, plow right ahead and then try it in other states. But we that our roots are in progressivism. This is where Social Security was born, was
Mm,
from Wisconsin. And so it makes our argument even stronger when we say Minnesota has legalized weed. Illinois has done it. It's in Michigan. We don't have to be this island anymore. We're going to win back that trifecta. It's absolutely possible in 2026. And that legislature is going to need to be led by an unapologetic governor who can say, no, New Mexico has universal childcare. North Dakota has a public bank. Let's fix the taxation system. Let's make sure working class people are getting their money's worth on the taxes that they have been paying for way too long and not seeing that money invested back into their community so that their lives can improve.
Yeah, with Scott Walker and obviously with the gerrymandered legislator, like they really wrecked things there, didn't they? Whether it was like now finally you can hopefully be able to public sector unions at some point. Like now that gerrymandering is hopefully going to end on the legislative level as well. But like they really screwed a lot of things up there. Like you mentioned vouchers. Like I know Wisconsin was one of the first to have universal vouchers, and it's like like $700 million going there this year. Like it's a big mess to clean up. And I know Tony Evers did it to some degree, but like that's the other thing. It's like there's almost a lot of low hanging fruit because they did so much damage.
Yeah. Minnesota had like a whiteboard and they crossed off the things that they needed to do and they only had a 1 seat majority, right?
Yeah,
And Governor Walz talks about this a lot. And it's, there's going to be infighting within the caucus, even when we have the majority
right.
fully prepared for that. But being realistic also means you have to negotiate from the top. You showing folks what is possible and then there may be compromise coming down, but it is like we have way too much harm to undo, and we also have to make bold investments right now because there is going to be mass suffering. I'm not quite sure we are ready for it when it starts hitting our neighbors because they do not have healthcare, they do
Yeah.
not have food. um, and so that is going to require folks being what I call risk tolerant and recognizing that to meet the urgency of this moment, we are going to have to take some risks, but we can mitigate those risks by actually having a fair taxation system, by making sure that we pass universal school meals because every kid should have a healthy breakfast and lunch when they're in school, and no kid should have to be in debt for it or lunching for it. And families, guess what? They're going to save money on groceries and they're going to be able to put that towards other things that they need. And so this is about people getting to live that they want, live the life that they want and that they deserve. And so we're going to have to act quickly. And when we deliver for voters, when they actually feel the policy improving their life, likely they're going to want to vote for the party that actually did that. And
Hmm.
so if we don't deliver quickly for folks, I don't know how we sustain. That's one of the best ways we if we do that, it's one of the best ways that we can actually not only have a good progressive infrastructure, but continue actually getting people to vote for us so that we can keep building that power and undoing a lot of the harm that was done by 12 years of, authoritarian Robin Voss rule.
Yeah, and so like that's I know I won't take too much of your time. But thinking about let's say you win, right? You guys get the trifecta. Like, what is the thinking about like when when Biden won and he did a few things, and then obviously things got tamped down by various members of the caucus. But like, what is like the big three, the big four things that are like, all right, we're gonna do this in the first 100 days. What does that look like for the Hong administration?
We're gonna have to do a top 10. The
Okay.
prep is long, but absolutely we have to repeal Act 10, repeal the 1849 abortion ban, ensure that there is gun safety regulations on background checks, universal background checks, extreme risk protection orders, universal childcare, universal paid leave, expand Badger Care so we can have cheaper healthcare for everyone. Let me see, make sure that that's not quite 10 yet, but it it's if
Busy
we
100
don't get
days.
those top 10 into um our budget right away, and if it doesn't pass through the budget process, we need to make sure we have legislation at the ready. That's work that we're actually already doing in the caucus so that we can make sure that when we have the majority and a progressive, bold governor, that we act with the urgency to meet the moment that we're in.
And so when you think about like, so, there's about a year or so to the primary. So what is that obviously like just other people might jump in, but what is like the building up a campaign for a statewide look like? You haven't run a statewide race before. So how do you navigate that and try to build out much bigger than what you've done before?
We have to raise about $1 million
Okay.
very quickly.
Okay.
But we also have to get our field program and invested it early. And I think it's already happening with folks across the state who believe in this campaign, who want to get involved, and who are going to make sure that they help power our campaign to win in August and then win again in November. So it's this is the one where when I talk about we're going to out hustle all the other candidates, we're going to be able to out hustle folks because we will absolutely have more boots on the ground. We will have more grassroots donation that come from folks, not just in Wisconsin, but working class people all across the country who know that as goes Wisconsin, as goes the country. So when we have a democratic socialist, a single mom, a service industry worker who's working alongside folks to make sure that we reclaim the progressive power that the state has deep roots in. I think we're only going to build up more momentum, more energy, bring in the dollars that we need. And the campaign team right now is pretty incredible.
Mm.
And I think it's because we have seasoned campaign staffers, but also some new folks who are bringing in the innovation, the creativity that we need to have a strong digital game, but also can tell us how we can reach voters who have not believed in the Democratic Party or any party, who are incredibly apathetic right now. They deserve to have a campaign that's also exciting and we're to be joyful, and campaigning should be fun. You're getting to meet people all across the state, but it's about making sure that those folks feel like they walk away wanting to organize and wanting to do more. And this is a campaign that's going to make sure that folks feel that right away when they join Team Hog, when they meet me and anyone else on the team.
And you mentioned the team thing, and you think about people like feeling they're a part of something. You know, Donald Trump does a lot of terrible things. One thing that sticks with me a lot is when he talks about winning. Right, you're gonna be so sick of winning, and it feels like I don't think he. I mean, I think we both can agree that things that he's doing are not racking up wins for a lot of his voters, maybe a lot of his donors, but not a lot of his voters. But there's an element of, like being a part of something. I really took from that, and like I don't think he takes that seriously. Right, I'm not saying that he's a great example of a person, but that language of like you're going to be winning, you're going to be part of something. Like broken clocks right twice a day. It's a blind dog if had something, but that to me sticks with me, and that you using that language I think is significant.
We have to be radically welcoming. I think Wisconsin is incredibly divided, but it's not rural urban. This is about the working class and the people at the top who are benefiting off of our labor. More folks recognize that they want to fight back. We're going to be the campaign that's giving them resources. Again, I think about the socialists coming into the Dem Party office, meeting other Dem volunteers. Uh, this campaign is going to be a connector. This campaign is about folks feeling like they're a part of a community, not just a campaign. And we're going to make sure when you focus on worker well-being, on workplace culture, um, believe me, I know about the stress. So I have a very high stress tolerance from being in this industry. But I also know that it's not sustainable. So that I think folks are going to get from this campaign as well. When we make folks believe, after they really feel like they belong, when we're radically welcoming, we're also scrappy as fuck and hustling.
Yeah. I like that. Scrappy as fuck is a good way. I mean, and I think like it's a way to look at a working class campaign, like a campaign of a parent, a campaign of like someone who's worked in the service industry. Like, it's almost like you don't want it to be too professional. You want it to be fighting.
We curse because we care.
Yeah.
I literally have merch that says join the cursing caucus.
I mean,
And
look, I'm a New Yorker, so I don't give a shit. It doesn't matter to me. You know, that's the least of the worries when it comes to politics.
it's probably most of the language I used when I was working in kitchens a lot was that. I probably like now my kiddo is sitting next to me here, so I'm gonna tamp it down a bit. But it goes back to like we never as Dems we didn't recognize that vulnerability can be powerful, right?
Yeah,
Like we should be angry in this moment. We should be terrified, and it's okay to show that and like have it that put that feeling behind your words because it
yeah,
makes your relatable more human and that maybe somebody like you is in power to do some good. And I'm going to be constantly fighting to make sure that I can earn that from folks. And it's going to take me, not being polished all the time. Gonna check in with my campaign later to see if I said anything gonna be flagged for
no,
folks.
I
But I like this. This is we're politicians are messy, people are messy.
yeah.
But
I
right
can't think
now
people
in this
care. I
moment,
can't think
yeah.
people care that you curse. Like, what dorks? Who cares?
Well, I
And of
know
all
that
things.
things are shifting because the white women who would yell at me about decorum are now also swearing, and
Yeah,
they've turned around. And so folks are getting there. And it's going to take people at different times to understand just how devastating this time is. But we can't give into despair. There are a lot of different ways to fight. It's not always going to be in the streets. It's not always going to be in the courtrooms, but we have to be everywhere. And if it means caring for your neighbor, somebody that you don't know, that still goes along.
absolutely. So how can people find your campaign and make some donations and get involved?
FrancescaHong.com. Hong is spelled like that. Francesca is Francesca. You can also follow us on socials, Francesca Hong WI. Um, would love a donation. You can fill out, there's a job form to volunteer on the campaign. And I also ask folks to look at some of the really great nonprofits doing work in your community. If you can give today to an organization that you care about, that you know is doing good work, please consider giving to them as well.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday night, and I'm sure we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for having me, Jordan.
Take care. Have a good one.